All right, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Radio Retrospekt. My name is Antonio Polanco, sitting alongside my co-host Alexander Martinez. Say hi to the good people, Al.
How you doing, guys?
All right, and so here on Radio Retrospekt, everything you hear is from that year, and today we are doing 1980.
It's the start of it's the start of the decade of X's.
Yep. Well, we had the Rubik's Cube and Yoda and the Walkman. They were all pretty popular this year.
Yellow ribbons were displayed for concern of the hostages in Iran.
Yep. And I guess what I thought was fun, Donahue became the most widely watched TV show in America. But also a couple other things. We had the cordless phone introduced, front wheel drive compact cars. Both of those were new. So Al, let's talk about as we usually do at the start, some of the economics of the year. You wanna?
Sure thing. The average cost of a new home was $68,000 to $76,000.
Nice.
The average income per year was $19,500. The average monthly rent was $300.
Right. Guy kills me every time with the rent. We had a gallon of gas cost about $1.19. Average cost of a new car was about $7,200.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to get a Pontiac Firebird, that was, $5,992 or $5,990. Yeah, I said it right. All right, I got a little mixed up with my numbers there, but pretty good looking back
Exactly.
for a Firebird.
A brand new Magnavox VHS recorder was $699. A VHS movie camera was $1,599.
Right. You wanted to get Mr. or Mrs. Potato Head, that would have cost you $4.77. If you wanted to get a three-piece suit, $89.95 in 1980.
And for you gamer heads out there, Commodore 64 was $400.
Oof. And just some regular stuff. The stamp cost 15 cents. A dozen eggs cost you about 91 cents. A gallon of milk was $2.16. And this is the year gold actually was, it hit $880 per ounce.
Jeez.
For gold. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of an idea of the economics of the year. Alex, why don't you run through some of the interesting international events
Sure.
that happened in 1980?
The Middle East was very important during this year.
It's usually important every year, I would think.
But on April 7th, the U.S. severs diplomatic relations with Iran and imposes economic sanctions for the taking of American hostages that happened the previous year on November 4th, 1979. On April 30th, 6 Iranian-born terrorists take over the Iranian embassy in London. The SAS retake the embassy on the 5th of May. Only one terrorist survives. On March 3rd, 1980, Pierre Trudeau returns as Prime Minister of Canada. He's the really popular Prime Minister. One of the things he did while in office was help keep Quebec as part of Canada.
Yeah, and I think his son was just nominated.
Yes.
Or he just won the election for Canadian
Minister.
Prime Minister. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Egypt and Israel resumed full diplomatic relations in February 26, 1980.
Right.
They've been in a state of war since 1948, which was the Arab-Israeli War, until the Yom Kippur War of 1973. The process begins with the Camp David Accords of 1978 and the formal peace treaty of 1979. We have the Talpiot tomb, or the tomb of Jesus and his family. This tomb was discovered during a construction project. 10 limestone ossuaries with bones were found in them. 6 were bearing epigraphs that were partially legible. The names were found were common for the era that they were constructed in. The name on one of the ossuaries is translated as Yeshua Bar Yosef, or Jesus, son of Joseph. This translation is widely disputed. In 2007, a documentary by James Cameron, he basically said that
he took a break from filming Avatar to just find the tomb of Jesus' family.
Well, he didn't find it; it was someone else. But he produced this documentary, and in the documentary, he basically says that this is the tomb of Jesus and his extended family. But oddly enough, this isn't the only tomb of Jesus. There's also the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Garden Tomb, and there's a tomb, oddly enough, in Shingo, Japan.
He made just a quick stop.
Yeah,
right.
apparently. Yeah, there's like a whole folklore story of him going to Japan and dying there. We also have Operation Eagle Claw. It was a mission to rescue the American hostages held in Iran. This was the first Delta Force mission. For those who don't know, Delta Force is sort of the Army's secret hush-hush special forces service. 8 helicopters were used, but only 5 arrived at the staging area, codenamed Desert One. The plan called for 6 helicopters in order to continue the mission, even though they could go with 4. Carter ordered the mission to be aborted. As U.S. forces were preparing to leave, one of the helicopters crashed into a transport aircraft that was carrying fuel and servicemen. This aircraft was destroyed, and 8 servicemen were killed. The hostages were later split up in order to prevent any type of rescue mission. Later on, President Carter blamed this failed mission for his loss in the election.
Well, it was I think it was one of the reasons, because there were quite a few reasons why Carter lost the election that year. Can I just say too, even though it was a failed mission, does that not sound like the most American, most badass name for like a covert mission? Operation Eagle Claw. Also a beautiful name, I think, for a boy or a girl.
Eagle Claw?
Eagle Claw, yeah.
From July 19th to August 3rd, we have the 1980 Summer Olympics held in Moscow. The United States did not participate for Moscow's role in Afghanistan.
Right, for the Soviets invading Afghanistan in 1979.
Yes, sir.
There were actually a few countries too that joined America in boycotting the Olympics. They couldn't get all of them on board, but I believe Japan was among them. Let's see, West Germany, Canada, but Carter couldn't get Great Britain or France or Greece to observe that boycott, and he actually threatened to revoke. Did President Carter threaten to revoke the passport of any U.S. athlete who attempted to participate in the Olympics? So, yeah, and it wasn't just athletes either. It was, there were other companies and interests that got affected by it. Sponsors, advertisers, broadcasters like NBC. So yeah, no.
Japan becomes the world's largest auto-producing country. We have Yasser Arafat is elected president of the Palestinian National Council. We also have the start of the Iran-Iraq war. The war
right. And that would go on for
8 years.
8 years.
About 1 million people, soldiers, civilians, lose their lives in this conflict. A formal peace treaty was agreed upon on August of 1990.
All right, and I think Zimbabwe also actually gained independence in 1980. So, so that was just a bit of the, on the international front, some of the major events that happened. Let's turn to stateside and what's going on in America. So, we had the Mariel boat lift, mass exodus of political refugees from Cuba to the United States, and mostly it was caused by a really bad Cuban economy, and that led to internal tensions, and a lot of Cubans sought to gain asylum. So Castro actually announced that any Cuban that wanted to leave the United States were free to board boats at the port of Mariel, west of Havana, and it actually ended up being 125,000 Cubans that left Cuba and tried to make it to the United States in about 1,700 boats, and a lot of boats were, since Cuban guards were, just packing boat after boat after boat. A lot of those were, a lot of the boats were overcrowded. They didn't really, think about safety. The boats definitely weren't, with that many people, they weren't seaworthy. So, we had a few migrants died. And this also kind of going back to, beating on President Carter. This also was something that a lot of people weren't happy with when they found that a lot of the refugees were, actually from, not a lot, but they discovered that a number of them were released from Cuban jails. They were in mental health facilities. And so, they were placed in these refugee camps. And actually, I believe in the beginning of Scarface, you could see a little bit. You guys might remember that scene of Tony and Manolo reaching Miami. So yeah, the Marielitos, as they became known, there were about 1,700 that were jailed, and another 580 that were detained because they couldn't find they didn't have sponsors in Florida. All right, next we have, and this is something that actually became known recently in the famous movie American Hustle, the Abscam operation, where the FBI they targeted members of Congress in a sting operation. So basically, it started off. The operation was about trafficking in stolen property and corruption that was being made by, or being done by these businessmen. But it later became this investigation into corruption in Congress, on the local level too. So if you guys remember the movie, Christian Bale played this con man, and he took part and sort of helped the FBI to videotape these politicians taking bribes from a fraudulent Arabian company for different political favors, like getting citizenship for the sheik and stuff like that. So all in all, more than 30 political figures were investigated, and among them, 7 congressmen were convicted. We had a member of the New Jersey State Senate, members of the Philadelphia City Council, the mayor of Camden, played well by Jeremy Renner, and an inspector for the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service. So yeah, Abscam, in a nutshell. A few other things. We had the 1980 Winter Olympics. You were talking a bit about the Olympic boycott in Moscow. So we had the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York. And I guess the most well-known event that happened, Alex, you know this one?
Miracle on Ice.
The Miracle on Ice. And it was funny too, because when in researching this, I didn't realize that game that became sort of like enshrined in sports, in great sports lore, that wasn't for the gold medal. That was actually the game leading up to the gold medal matchup, right?
Yeah.
But the hockey team was, they were underdogs. I think they were like.
Well, the team was composed mostly of kids from college versus a very veteran, experienced Russian team. The Russians were basically unstoppable. They beat everybody in their path. I think they beat a few times.
They were seeded 7th, the
Team
United
USA?
States team out of 12.
Yeah. Well, by that point we hadn't won since 1960, so it was a big deal. We ended their winning streak, the Soviet Union winning streak.
Yep. And then I think they actually ended up after that game, they beat Finland 4-2 to win the gold medal.
Yes.
And that was where Al Michaels said his famous "Do you believe in miracles?" line that kind of is synonymous with the Miracle on Ice.
Yes.
And actually, the Lake Placid Olympics was the first use of artificial snow in Winter Olympic competition. All right, so we had a few other things. We talked a little bit about, as you mentioned before, Alex, the President Carter sort of boycotting the game. We had, he actually, and let me just say this, he lost the presidential election in 1980 to our friend, the great communicator, Ronald Reagan. And that was, a major shift in, well, really, I mean, it's considered one of the most consequential elections because, our nation definitely took a different path. It changed, it gave a face to this new conservative movement, to, Reagan economics. Basically what led to Reagan winning the 1980 election. So we had a lot of people weren't happy with President Carter and how he had bungled, the Iranian hostage situation. There was high inflation, unemployment, gas shortages. I mean, and if you see pictures, just like lines, miles of cars trying to get gas. So that, in addition to, a weak foreign policy and a general malaise. I mean, I think a lot of people, weren't happy with where the country was going, and then there was the excess of the 70s, et cetera. And all that came to a halt when Reagan, who actually did run in 76, ran again in 1980 and won it's in a landslide. A lot of people say that they were tied, but if you look at the numbers, I mean, he won, or Reagan got 44 million votes and 489 electoral votes to Carter's 35 million votes, and he only had 44 electoral votes in that election. So with that, Ronald Reagan became the oldest person ever elected to president for a first term. He was 68, and as I mentioned before, he received the largest number of electoral votes ever won by a non-incumbent presidential candidate. And again, this election marked what some people called the Reagan Revolution or the Reagan era, or whatever you want to call it, and really a movement more towards a conservative realignment and kind of getting away from big government that kind of broke up FDR's little political group that was still holding a lot of power for decades. So definitely a shift in national politics when Reagan got elected. We also had the 1980 U.S. heat wave, and that summer, that heat wave claimed 1,700 lives, and this was intense heat and drought that pretty much devastated the Midwest, Southern Plains, and it is still considered among the most devastating natural disasters in terms of death and destruction in U.S. history. And it's among the billion-dollar weather disasters listed by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We also had a few other things. We had the fire at MGM Grand Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip killed about 85 people. More than 700 were injured. And it's considered, again, one of the worst hotel fires in modern U.S. history. Couple of things on the legislative side. Al, we had... Oh, sorry, I tripped over my notes there, guys. I'm so sorry.
We had the U.S. the Crude Oil Windfall Profits Tax Act to tax high profits by oil companies.
Yep. We had also regulations prohibiting sexual harassment of women by their superiors in government or businesses, and those regulations were actually written down and issued by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in April, and that kind of just stating that it was a form of sex discrimination prohibited by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this I thought was weird. In a landmark ruling in June, in a landmark ruling on genetic engineering, the Supreme Court ruled that organisms created in a laboratory could be patented. I thought that was kind of weird. So we had a few other things happen in the United States. Two networks got their start in 1980. We had CNN, the cable news network. The first 24-hour news channel was launched on June 1st, 1980. Yep, by Ted Turner. And he actually, the inaugural broadcast was an introduction by Ted Turner, and he said, "We won't be signing off until the world ends. We'll be on, we'll be covering it live, and that will be our last event. We'll play the national anthem for one time on the 1st of June that day, and that's all. When the world ends, when the end of the world comes, we'll play Nearer, My God, to Thee before we sign off." That video, his like doomsday video, was just released a few months ago.
Yeah.
Very, very odd sort of video there. The doomsday, CNN's doomsday video.
Guess it's good to be prepared.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we never have to see that in our lifetime. Seriously, let's hope we never have to see that in our lifetime. And CNN actually was when it started, of course, like, new television enterprises, kind of, unknown, this 24-hour news channel. They actually were called, because they didn't have, the financial resources of, other sort of news conglomerates, they were called the Chicken Noodle Network. Yeah, and after it was in development for 4 years, CNN signed on the air June 1st, 1980, with a news telecast anchored by the husband and wife team of Dave Walker and Lois Hart. And there was another channel actually, Al, that started in 1980, Black Entertainment Television. BET.
Nice.
Big ups to BET. That launched, and actually, weirdly enough, it launched as a block of programming on the Nickelodeon TV network when it first started. So we had Robert Johnson. He was formerly a lobbyist. At the time, he was a lobbyist for the cable industry, and he decided to launch his own cable network. So he got a loan for $15,000, and he got a $500,000 investment from media executive John Malento to start BET. It launched on January 25th, 1980, and again, initially broadcasting as 2-hour block, 2 hours a week as a block of programming on Nickelodeon. It wouldn't be until 3 years later that it became like a full-fledged channel. But the network's lineup consisted of videos, movies, and reruns of popular African American sitcoms. Good times, maybe. But yeah, so we had CNN and BET both get their start in 1980. Yep, and then sort of a weird thing, John Wayne Gacy Jr.,
yes.
Killer Clown, serial killer. He was sentenced to death in 1980 for the murder of 33 boys and young men, and there is something wrong with that dude. He would strangle, he would lure his victims in, right, with promise of construction work or whatever. He captured them, sexually assaulted them, and then eventually strangled most of them with rope. And when he killed, he sometimes dressed as his alter ego Pogo the Clown, and I think he actually was a clown at some parties. He got hired as like a birthday clown. But ultimately, he was found guilty of committing 33 murders, and he was sentenced to serve 12 death sentences and 21 natural life sentences. So yeah, they were just like burying him with jail time, and well deserved too, 'cause it's freaking crazy. And just another sad note in 1980, and one that all music lovers would know, I would think, and that was John Lennon. He got shot outside his apartment in New York City at the Dakota by Mark David Chapman. Got shot 4 times with Chapman shot him with 5 hollow point bullets at close range, about 5 or 9 or 10 feet away. Lennon staggered, or he fell obviously to the ground and staggered. He kept saying, "I'm shot, I'm shot," and he fell to the floor. And actually, strangely enough, that famous picture of him and Yoko Ono that was photographed by Annie Leibovitz was shot 5 hours before his murder. So, yeah, of course, people all over the world, Beatle lovers everywhere were sad. And Howard Cosell even announced it in the closing seconds of Monday Night Football games. And his single, and I love this song, John Lennon's single, Just Like Starting Over, subsequently became a #1 hit in a lot of countries, in America and UK and Australia. And on December 14th, over 100,000 mourners attended a public vigil for John Lennon in Central Park, where they observed 10 minutes of silence at 2 o'clock. And actually, Chapman, he's still in jail. He's still locked up, of course. And I'm pretty sure that Yoko Ono makes an appearance at every one of his parole hearings, just to remind the parole board of, the not just a callous and vicious murder, but really taking away of a musical genius. We can't even imagine, right, of like the stuff that John Lennon would have come out with if he weren't taken away so soon. He was actually 40 at the time, so very sad. Even now, that tells you a lot. Even now, it's still sad whenever you hear about John Lennon's murder. But again, another tragic incident that occurred in 1980. All right, Al, you want to talk about what you want to talk about? Some of the things that happened in terms of science and innovation.
Sure. The Voyager 1 probe sends the first high-resolution images of Saturn back to scientists and confirms the existence of Janus, a moon of Saturn. The first birth of a giant panda in captivity happened in Mexico. 30% of U.S. car sales are imported. The first available fax machines come out in Japan. Also, the first domestic camcorders are available in Japan.
Those things were probably the size of like VCRs.
Of a suitcase.
Yeah, like a suitcase.
Turbo home movies begin to show up everywhere. The Audi Quattro, a 4-wheel drive sporting coupe, is launched in the West. The Post-it notes, invented by Arthur Fry and Spencer Silver, begin sale. Janice Brown, a 98-pound former teacher, makes her first long-distance solar-powered flight in the Solar Challenger. And the Digital Equipment Corporation, Intel, and Xerox introduced the DIX standard for Ethernet.
All right, cool, very cool. All right, Al. So let's talk about the culture a little bit. So, what do we start with here? What do you want to start with?
Well, I think the biggest thing is Pac-Man is released.
Pac-Man, yes.
It's the best-selling arcade game of all time. It's released by Namco, originally known as Pac-Man in Japan.
They had to change it. They had to change Pac-Man to Pac-Man because apparently Pac-Man sounded too much like
a certain F word.
A certain F word, yeah.
It becomes the highest-grossing game of all time. It's the first gaming character mascot, and established the maze chase genre.
Right.
Open gaming to female audiences. Introduced power-ups.
Yep.
And it featured cutscenes.
Yep, and actually the original name came from the Japanese word paku,
Yes.
which meant chomp. And I think Pac-Man actually makes sense. I didn't realize it at first, but obviously he's like, he's a puck.
Yeah, he's
just
circle
going around.
size.
So what do we know about Pac-Man? Right, we have 244 dots in a maze, right? And Pac-Man, I'm being a what's the word I'm looking for here? Traditionalist. I'm gonna call him Pac-Man. No. So Pac-Man must eat them all in order to proceed to the next level. The 240 small dots, they're each worth 10 points, and the 4 large dots, which they're actually known as energizers, are worth 50. We have Pac-Man. We have the 4 ghosts, right? That are just chasing him around all over the place. Blinky, right? Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. And and they each had a different personality. So Blinky and Pinky, they were predictable because they chased Pac-Man, right, in the most direct way. Inky implemented the ambush tactics, and Clyde was actually considered, he's considered the most dangerous ghost because his behavior is totally random.
Look at that.
In case any of you guys are looking to improve on your Pac-Man skills, the character has appeared in more than 30 officially licensed game spin-offs, and a whole ton of clones and sort of unauthorized bootlegs. And actually, Pac-Man has the highest. And I'm driving you crazy, right? I know I'm not saying Pac-Man. I'm saying Pac-Man. Pac-Man has the highest brand awareness of any video game character among American consumers, recognized by 94% of them. And so, yeah, I mean, with that, the game was highly popular. And by the 90s, it had earned $2.5 billion in quarters. So, another cool gaming thing that actually happened in 1982, Nintendo, they released the Game & Watch series. I don't know if you remember those of LCD handheld electronic games. So that, of course, Pac-Man, special place in all our hearts. What about in terms of film? What were some of the movies that came out in 1980? We had some pretty tremendous ones, right?
Yes, we did. Well, a personal favorite of mine, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, comes out.
I've never heard of it. What is Star Wars?
Yeah, just a little film that made some noise in the 70s.
Okay.
Our heroes return, introduce a new character of Yoda and Boba Fett, and we find out a little bit more about Luke and his family.
Yep. And that was the highest grossing movie of 1980, just like Star Wars was 3 years before. Empire Strikes Back grossed about $209 million in 1980. So we had a couple of other cool movies that came out that year. Superman 2.
Superman 2. Christopher Reeve returns as Superman.
Yep.
We see him go up against General Zod.
General Zod, yeah.
We have 9 to 5. We have Raging Bull.
Classic.
Coal Miner's Daughter.
Right. Airplane.
Another favorite.
The Shining. Right. The Elephant Man. Amazing. Friday the 13th. The first Friday the 13th movie was released in 1980.
The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yep.
Ordinary People. Another favorite of mine, Caddyshack.
Yep.
An 80s cult classic, Flash Gordon.
Flash. Sorry.
Fame.
That's got to be like a tick. I think I have like a Flash Gordon.
Flash.
Or you just say Flash every time you hear Flash Gordon.
We also have Popeye.
Yep.
Another favorite of mine, though. I don't think many people like that one. And American Gigolo.
Right. We had so the Blues Brothers actually was also released in 1980, and in addition to being one of the top grossing movies of the year. It was the first movie or the first feature film to be based on characters created on SNL, and that's a trend that we see. I don't remember the last SNL character movie though that came out, but in the '90s in the '80s and the '90s that was a pretty big thing.
I think the last one was that I can remember is Night at the Roxbury.
Probably Night at the Roxbury.
With the two brothers who love to club.
Yep.
And go clubbing.
And also in terms of film, we had the Academy Awards, 52nd Academy Awards, hosted by Johnny Carson. There was Kramer versus Kramer, actually won not just Best Picture, but Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Original Screenplay. And actually, Dustin Hoffman's speech for Kramer versus Kramer is one of my. It's such a great award speech. If you get a chance, definitely check it out. And then Sally Field won Best Actress for Norma Ray. All right, Al. So that was a bit in terms of on the film front. What about TV?
Sure. We have Walter Cronkite announce his retirement from CBS Evening News, which took effect on March 1981.
Yep. And he was later succeeded by Dan Rather.
Yes, Dan Rather. We have Archie Bunker's Place begins its season with the episode Archie Alone, in which Archie Bunker grieves of the death of his wife Edith. Gene Stapleton had departed from the show.
Right. And actually that performance for that episode won him a Peabody Award. And it was actually interesting that the sort of the statement that they put for the Peabody Award was Carol O'Connor, personal Peabody Award for his work in an episode of the Archie Bunker's Place series. His sensitive reaction to the loss of Archie's beloved wife Edith is so profound, so moving, and so real that it becomes more than a performance. It has all the agony of real grief. Millions of viewers loved Edith, and they shared in Archie's loss with sincere sympathy, and Carol O'Connor achieved a new and well-deserved recognition as an actor of unlimited emotional range. And I was actually surprised when I found out that Edith was gone. She's such a major TV character from All in the Family, so it was just kind of weird to, doing this research, kind of find out that there was a spinoff show and Edith had died. So and there was another major TV program that happened in 1980.
Of course, everybody was dying to figure out who shot JR.
Right.
And then record reviewers tuned in
on Dallas.
On
the show Dallas.
They tuned in to learn who. They tuned in to learn who shot JR. The lead character, J.R. Ewing. It became an international obsession.
Yeah. So they ended the season with JR getting shot, right? And viewers had to wait like all summer to find out, to learn whether he would live or whether he survived, and who was the one that, of course, shot him. And then the actual Who Shot JR episode.
Spoilers.
Was what? Well, yeah, I guess a spoiler. Estimated that 83 million people watched the episode, and it was. I mean, it did become, a phenomenon. It was on shirts. There was people talking about, and that was. I mean, 83 million. That's more than the number of voters in that year's election. But ultimately, right, the person, when the episode was broadcast, right, the person who pulled the trigger was Kristen Shepherd, played by Mary Crosby. And Kristen was JR's scheming sister-in-law and mistress who shot him in a fit of anger. JR did not press charges, as Kristen claimed she was pregnant with his child as a result of their affair. Very juicy. Very juicy
soap opera.
And actually, another cool thing, Eddie Murphy made his first Saturday Night Live appearance, appearing in a non-speaking role in the sketch In Search of the Negro Republican. That actually, it's just the name's funny.
It just
I
sounds
want to
funny,
see that
yeah.
sketch. All right, man.
We also have the NFL Draft is televised for the first time on ESPN.
Yep.
Jet fans can be disappointed in real time.
Right. And there were actually on the sports front, right? We had the Islanders. They won their first Stanley Cup from a goal by Bobby Nystrom in Game 6 overtime, the 1980 Stanley Cup Finals. They beat the Flyers, the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, it was their first Stanley Cup win, their first in 4 in a row. This started the Islander dynasty of the 80s.
Right. And we had Super Bowl, right? Super Bowl 14. Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the LA Rams 31-19. We also had...
This was also the last Super Bowl win for those 70 dynasty Pittsburgh Steelers.
It was a great team. The Steelers and the Raiders in the 70s, man, they were just... You just could not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steelers, Raiders, and Cowboys.
We also had the NBA basketball championship, and that was won by the LA Lakers, and they defeated the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yep, they were led by a rookie named Magic Johnson.
Nice.
We also have the World Series that
Name dropper. Name dropping. All right.
The Phillies win the World Series, defeating the Kansas City Royals 4-2.
Yeah, and actually, you know what's weird, Al? The Stanley Cup, the NBA championship, the World Series, all winners 4-2.
And they were all and Philadelphia was in the Stanley Cup, the NBA, and World Series. They only won the World Series. Look at that.
Right, so don't feel too bad, Philly. You got 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
All right, and then moving from kind of a weird segue here, Al, we're gonna go to some books that came out in 1980. We had Douglas Adams' The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. We had Petals on the Wind by V.C. Andrews. Earthly Powers by Anthony Burgess. More well known for Clockwork Orange, but we had The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. The Bourne Identity came out in 1980, written by Robert Ludlum.
Look at that.
Midnight's Children, written by Salman Rushdie. Red Dragon, in the sort of Hannibal Lecter series, that was written by Thomas Harris. And two personal favorites of mine, two personal favorite books came out in 1980. A Confederacy of Dunces, written by John Kennedy Toole, and Still Life of Woodpecker, written by Tom Robbins. Love those two books. Two of my favorites. Both came out in 1980. All right, so going from books, let's talk about music a little bit. So what were some of the things that happened in the music world?
Sure, we have Pink Floyd releases Another Brick in the Wall. We have Barbra Streisand, Woman in Love. John Lennon's Starting Over. Lips Inc., Funky Town.
Right, and these were the most popular songs.
The most popular song of the 80s. And Diana Ross's Upside Down.
Upside down. I can't do the voice. Some other cool stuff. Iron Maiden's debut self-titled album, Iron Maiden, is released. We had Quincy Jones. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The singer and songwriter of Joy Division, Ian Curtis, was found hanged. The album Back in Black was released by AC/DC, famous album, one of their best albums. I'm sure there's some purists out there that will disagree with me, but
Led Zeppelin breaks up due to the death of their drummer John Bonham.
Right. And we mentioned this before. The Sony Walkman went on sale in the United States on June 25th. And actually, we had also the first Monsters of Rock heavy metal festival in August, and it's held in Donington Park in England. Rainbow headlines, and some other people that performed: Judas Priest, Scorpions, April Wine, Saxon, and Riot and Touch.
The single Groovy Ghost Show by Casper is one of the first recorded hip-hop songs from Chicago.
Nice.
Never knew that.
Yeah, and then well, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Amadeus, a play that was written by Peter Schaefer, starring Tim Curry as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ian McKellen as Antonio Salieri, opened at the Broadhurst Theater in New York City.
It's a hell of a cast.
All right, and then in the art world, we had Pablo Picasso retrospective exhibition at the MoMA, at the Museum of Modern Art, in New York, and it was the largest and most complete Picasso exhibition ever held in the United States. And on May 29th, my sister's birthday, shout out to Mars. Happy birthday, Mars. On May 29th, a world auction record for a painting was set at the time when JMW Turner's Juliet and Her Nurse was sold in New York City for $6,400,000. Then later in October, the second highest art auction price for an American painting was paid for Winslow Homer's Signal of Distress. Yeah. All right, and so Al, let's end the show as we usually do with a couple of bullet points.
Sure.
You wanna start there?
Sure. We have Voyager 1 probe confirms the existence of Janus, the moon of Saturn.
Right, you had mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
On April 21st, Rosie Ruiz wins the Boston Marathon, but is later exposed as a fraud and stripped of her award.
Right.
I think she took public transportation at some point to get ahead.
We had Nigel Short, 14 years old.
Yes.
He became the youngest chess player to be awarded the degree of International Master.
On May 11th, we have Monster. Henry Hill is arrested for drug possession. His story becomes the basis for the movie Goodfellas.
Right. Which part of that was that? You think this was like the end part?
No, wasn't it the whole story?
No, it was the end when he was like all coked out.
Okay. On May 18th, we have the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. It kills 57 and costs $3 billion in damages.
Right. And we had a guy by the name of Paul Geidel. He was convicted. Listen to this, Al. He was convicted of second-degree murder in 1911 and is released from prison in Beacon, New York, after 68 years and 245 days. And that is one of the longest time sentences served by an inmate in America.
Jeez.
Like, that is just your whole life gone.
Man out of time.
We had Richard Pryor. He was badly burned trying to freebase cocaine in L.A. And actually, also, strangely enough, this was the year where Paul McCartney was arrested in Tokyo for possession of half a pound of that sweet, sweet Mary Jane. And the remaining part of McCartney's and Wings tour was canceled because of that.
We have 400 cases of toxic shock syndrome caused by certain kinds of tampons. It led to a recall of a tampon product manufactured by Procter & Gamble. Federal studies had linked use of the tampon with the death of 25 women.
Yeah, they had to remove products. Did Procter & Gamble off the market for that, because of toxic shock syndrome. We also had Vernon Jordan. He was shot and critically injured in an assassination attempt in Fort Wayne, Indiana, by Joseph Paul Franklin. And this was actually the first major news story for CNN. We also had, going back to gaming a little bit, Al, the Electronic Games host the first arcade awards, and I'm thinking it's just because of the Pac-Man effect.
Yeah.
It's the first video game award ceremony, and actually, Space Invaders won the overall game of the year.
Gary Larson, single panel comic, The Far Side.
The Far Side
debuts in the San Francisco Chronicle. It's a personal favorite of mine. We have Tim Berners-Lee begins work on Enquire, the system that eventually will lead to the creation of the World Wide Web in the fall of 1990.
Yep. And we had the trial of Elvis Presley's physician, and that revealed that Elvis took 10,000 pills in the 20 months prior to his death. Wow. That's a whole lot of pills.
Yeah.
And on a final note, right? Let's end on a positive note with smallpox being eradicated. Sorry, let me finish. I meant to finish that. So smallpox was eradicated in 1980. Basically, if a particular disease is eliminated worldwide, it's considered eradicated. To date, unfortunately, only one infectious disease that affects humans has been eradicated. After decades of work by the World Health Organization, they coordinated efforts, rid the world of smallpox, and it actually at one point killed 35% of its victims and left others scarred or blind. But smallpox eradication, right, was accomplished with a combination of focused surveillance, quickly identifying new cases, and ring vaccination. So, yeah, I'm waiting for the next disease to be eradicated. I've been saying this for years. I'm like, when is something gonna get cured? Something devastating like smallpox, but common cold, cancer, anything. So that's it, guys. That's 1980. And we thank you so much for listening. Just a few quick things. If you want to reach us, you can reach us at Radio Retrospekt at gmail.com, and that is retrospect with a K, so that is R-E-T. Wait, let me spell that right here. I'm gonna spell it one letter at a time. All right. RETROSPEKT. Radio Retrospekt at gmail.com, and you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, at Radio Retrospekt. And big shout out to the studio actually making this possible. We are literally brought to you because of Level X Studios in Brooklyn, New York. And you can actually contact them at that's LVLX Studios. So LVLXstudios.com. And guys, thank you so much for listening. Can't wait to come back, and we'll talk about, Alex?
The 1990s.
1990. Thank you, guys.